Welcome, everyone. Ready to deep dive into economics with us today?
Well, always exciting to explore this stuff.
We'll be using an article from the Deep Dive podcast dated December 15th, 2024. It's called A Beginner's Guide to Economic Theories, History, and Modern Relevance. You know, it's like economics is this massive puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
And all these theories are like pieces that help us
Make sense of it all.
exactly get the bigger picture. But
Right before we jump into all that,
we should probably lay some groundwork first, right?
definitely gotta have those basics down. Things like
Supply and demand.
opportunity cost, can't forget those.
And what about
Central banks.
huge role there?
It all kind of sets the stage.
For sure. Like supply and demand, it's the heart of how prices work.
Oh, totally.
Like when your favorite coffee suddenly gets pricey.
Bean shortage.
Exactly. Supply and demand in action. Then you've got opportunity cost.
Every choice has a trade-off.
Resources are limited.
So what are you giving up by picking one thing over another?
Right. Like spending the weekend binging that new show instead of finishing that freelance project.
There you go. Income versus instant gratification.
Mm.
And of course,
Variable bakes.
they can really make wave.
Adjusting interest rates.
Managing the money supply.
It's a delicate balance they're trying to strike.
Keep inflation in check, but also
Yeah. Keep the economy growing.
it's a tough job for sure. Okay, so we've got those foundational pieces. Now let's dive into some major economic theories. Where should we start?
Well, classical economics seems like a good place to begin. It's like the granddaddy of them all.
It is going way back to the 18th century. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, the whole shebang.
Invisible hand, right?
Exactly. The idea that when individuals just do their own thing,
In a free market, everyone benefits.
competition is key, private property rights, and minimal government meddling.
Basically, let the market do its thing.
That's the idea.
Right.
Classical economics says that leads
The
to
best use of resources.
and the most prosperity overall. Makes sense on paper, but,
But history shows it's not always so smooth, right?
well, there's definitely been some bumps along the way,
Like, what about monopolies?
where one big player controls everything.
Or when markets just don't factor in things like...
Pollution, the environment.
Critics point out that classical economics doesn't always have the answers for those kinds of issues.
Yeah, market failures, income inequality, all that.
And then, of course, there was...
The Great Depression.
which kind of paved the way for Keynesian economics.
Enter John Maynard Keynes, right on cue.
He came along and said
The
sometimes,
government needs to step in.
especially during those rough patches, like recessions,
Because when the economy takes a hit, demand plummets.
less spending.
Job losses, it's this nasty cycle.
Keynes said the government could,
Jumpstart things again.
by spending more, even if it means
Going into debt a bit.
it's like giving the economy a boost.
Exactly. The multiplier effect is at play here.
So the government spends money,
And that money ripples through the economy.
creating jobs, boosting demand,
Like investing in big infrastructure projects
building roads, bridges,
creates jobs in construction, but also
in the industry supplying those projects,
materials, transportation, you name it.
a real chain reaction.
Precisely. And that's Keynesian economics in a nutshell.
Now, how does monetarism fit into all this?
Monetarism. This one puts the spotlight on.
The money?
Milton Friedman was the big name here, mid-20th century.
Control the money supply, and you can control,
Inflation.
keep the economy stable.
Monetarists say that too much money printing,
Leads to inflation.
but not enough can really stifle growth.
So they believe in a strong role for
Central banks
using tools like interest rates
and reserve requirements.
to fine-tune things.
They're not big on government intervention in other areas, though.
Let the market do its thing, but
Keep a tight rein on the money supply.
to ensure everything runs smoothly.
Predictability is key.
So we've got classical economics advocating for free markets, Keynesian economics saying the government needs to step in sometimes, and monetarism focusing on that money supply. It's amazing how each one looks at things from a totally different angle.
Different tools for different jobs, right?
Before we jump into some other theories like the Austrian school and behavioral economics, do you have any real-world examples of these ideas in action?
Oh, tons. Take the New Deal programs during the Great Depression. They were straight out of the Keynesian playbook. Government spending on public works to create jobs and boost demand.
Makes sense.
Then you've got Reaganomics in the 80s. Tax cuts, deregulation, very classical in its approach.
Let those free markets work their magic.
Exactly. And of course, central banks all over the world are constantly tweaking interest rates and using other tools to manage things. A bit of monetarism and Keynesianism all rolled into one.
So these theories aren't just abstract ideas.
Nope. They have shaped how economies are run, for better or worse.
Fascinating. This has been a great start to our deep dive. We've laid a good foundation with those basic concepts and explored three major theories. But before we move on to some other fascinating schools of thought, any last thoughts for our listeners?
Well, it's important to remember that these are just theories, frameworks for understanding a very complex world.
Right.
The real world throws curveballs all the time. Economic policy isn't just about picking the right theory.
It's more nuanced than that.
You've got to consider the trade-offs, different perspectives, all of that.
Food for thought as we get ready for part 2. We'll be back soon to explore even more economic theories. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. Welcome back for more economic deep diving.
Round 2.
Last time, we tackled those big ones. Classical, Keynesian, monetarism.
A lot to unpack there.
But now, let's explore some different viewpoints.
Like the Austrian school, right?
Exactly. They're all about
Free markets.
individual liberty, the whole 9 yards.
But how are they different from the classical economists we talked about before? They seem pretty similar.
Good question. While they both love free markets, the Austrian school takes it even further. They're like,
Extreme free market fans.
pretty much. They say any government intervention
Even a little bit.
messes things up,
Really?
distorts prices, hinders innovation.
So even less hands-on than the classical folks.
Way less. They believe in this thing called...
Like spontaneous order.
Yeah. Basically, let individuals do their thing, guided by the invisible hand.
And everything just works out.
That's the idea. A more dynamic and prosperous society, they say.
Bold. But I can see the appeal for people who value freedom.
Don't trust the government too much.
Right. But what about things like, social safety nets? Protecting the environment.
Yeah, that's a big criticism of the Austrian school.
Because wouldn't a purely free market leave some people behind?
Critics say, yeah, it ignores those potential market failures.
When things don't work out so perfectly.
And the need for some government role in addressing things like poverty, inequality, environmental stuff.
They argue that sometimes you need someone to step in and help out.
Exactly. It's a big debate, for sure.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's switch gears completely and talk about behavioral economics.
Now, this one is really interesting.
Because it brings in
Psychology.
trying to understand
How people actually make decisions.
not just how some theoretical model says they should.
Right, because in the real world, people aren't always...
Perfectly rational.
We make emotional decisions.
All the time.
So behavioral economics acknowledges that,
We're human. We have biases. We use shortcuts.
and those things affect our choices, especially about money.
Exactly. Think about all those impulse buys you've made.
Or when you just can't sell that stock, even though it's tanking.
You're attached to it. Emotions getting in the way.
We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like. It's so true. But how does behavioral economics actually get used?
It's huge in all sorts of fields. Marketing, advertising,
They're definitely using it.
public policy, financial regulation. So understanding how our brains work can help.
Design better policies. Encourage people to save for retirement. Make healthier choices.
By recognizing those biases.
We can nudge people in the right direction.
So it's not about tricking people.
No manipulation. It's about using those insights.
To help people make better choices.
Exactly. For a more equitable, sustainable society.
This has been amazing. We've gone from classical economics with its free market focus to Keynesian economics with the government stepping in, to monetarism, all about that money supply, then the Austrian school's hardcore free market stance, and now behavioral economics, which brings psychology into the mix. It's incredible how each theory offers a totally different perspective.
It's like having a whole toolkit.
Right. And each tool has its own purpose.
And its limitations.
So it's not about picking the one right theory.
More about understanding how they all fit together.
And how they've shaped our world.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this part, I think it's important to remember that all of this has had a real impact on how we view the economic landscape. And as we move into the future,
With all its challenges and opportunities.
it's going to be fascinating to see how these theories continue to evolve.
Back for the final round of our economic theories deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from classical economics to behavioral economics. It's really amazing to see how much these theories have impacted our understanding of economic systems and how those systems are managed.
It really shows how dynamic economic thought can be. As the world keeps changing, so do the theories we use to make sense of it all.
And speaking of change, we can't ignore the massive shifts happening in the world today, right? We're talking about things like technology and climate change. They're shaking things up, bringing both challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. They're completely reshaping industries, policies, even our daily lives. It's pretty incredible to witness.
So let's start with technology. AI, automation, digital platforms, it feels like they're everywhere. But how is all this impacting the way we work? Are we all going to be replaced by robots?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's a complicated one. While it's true that automation can displace jobs, especially those routine tasks in manufacturing, it also creates a whole bunch of new opportunities in fields like software development, data analysis, and AI management.
So it's not necessarily a robots versus humans situation. It's more like we need to adapt to the changing job market.
Exactly. The key is to focus on building skills that complement technology, not compete with it. Think creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, interpersonal skills. Those are the areas where humans still have a huge edge.
It's almost like a shift from just knowing the technical stuff to a combination of technical and human skills.
Right. Finding that balance between human ingenuity and all the technological advancements is going to be key. And this leads us right into another crucial topic: climate change.
It's not just an environmental issue anymore. It's impacting economics in a big way. We're talking more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, not to mention resource scarcity. It's all having a huge effect on industries and economies worldwide.
Definitely. The economic implications of climate change are massive and can't be ignored. But it's not all doom and gloom. Shifting to a more sustainable economy opens up a ton of opportunities for innovation and growth in fields like renewable energy, green technology, and sustainable agriculture.
It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Mm.
decoupling economic growth from environmental damage, building a system that's both prosperous and sustainable in the long run.
Absolutely. And it's going to take a joint effort from governments, businesses, and individuals. Governments can incentivize investments in renewables and sustainable practices. Businesses can innovate and adopt greener ways of doing things. And consumers can make conscious choices to support sustainability.
We all have a part to play. Our economic choices have real consequences for the planet and future generations. Now, looking beyond tech and climate change, are there any other trends or challenges that we need to keep an eye on as we think about the future of economics?
Well, the rise of the gig economy is a big one. More and more people are freelancing, working as independent contractors, or doing part-time gigs instead of traditional full-time jobs.
It's interesting, right? There's a lot of flexibility and autonomy, but also concerns about job security and benefits. It's a mixed bag.
For sure. It creates opportunities for some, but also raises questions about fair labor practices and providing safety nets for those who might not have access to traditional benefits. Then you have the increasing interconnectedness of the global economy. Goods, services, capital, it's all flowing across borders like never before.
It makes the world feel smaller, in a way.
It does.
Yeah.
But it also means that economies are more vulnerable to global shocks, like supply chain disruptions or geopolitical events.
It's a good reminder that we're all connected, and what happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects everywhere else.
Exactly. That's why understanding economic principles and theories is so important. It helps us navigate this complex world and make better decisions, both individually and as a society.
This deep dive has been amazing. We've explored so much, from classical economics to behavioral economics. It's incredible to see how these theories are being challenged and reshaped by things like technology, climate change, and the way work is evolving.
It's a constant evolution for sure. Economics is a living, breathing field that needs to adapt to the changing realities of our world.
As we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd say stay curious about economics. The world's always changing, so keep learning, stay informed, and don't be afraid to ask questions. By understanding economic principles and having these important conversations, we can all contribute to a better economic future.
That's great advice. Economics isn't just about abstract theories. It's about understanding the forces that shape our lives, our communities, and our world. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of economics. We hope you found it insightful and engaging. Until next time, keep exploring and keep those economic gears turning.